Welcome to this lecture. I'm Scott Patton, the Dean of Blogonomics and Podology, and we're going to answer the question, why podcast? Really, when you podcast, you are actually as intimate as is possible to get with another human being, especially when you're not anywhere near them, because you're right in their heads. So we're going to take a look at a few reasons why people listen to podcasts. First of all, of course, it's free. And when Steve Jobs first decided to come out with the iPod, that was one of the things he was looking for. It's like, yeah, we might be able to sell some music and we might be able to sell other stuff, but what's really going to drive people? What can they get free? And there's this thing called podcast where people are talking and doing music and doing all sorts of stuff and teaching. And it's convenient. You've got a choice because you can listen to what you want, when you want, where you want, and there's a massive variety of topics. And almost all of them have no commercials. I often think of it as the alternative to talk radio. Tons of people listen to talk radio all the time. The problem with talk radio, every 15 minutes you hear the news headlines, you hear the weather, you hear the sports headlines, you hear 10 minutes worth of commercials and really very, very little content. Certainly no content in any sort of depth. And that's why people turn to podcasting. And the beauty of it too is you don't have to sit at your computer to listen. So before you had a choice. You could listen to music, listen to talk radio. That was your radio. You've got a CD player or a cassette player, or an 8-track cassette player, or vinyl records, or CDs, and you could play those things. And of course, a lot of people who are coaches would say, turn your car into a university on wheels. So this was the first chance we had to be able to really not sit at our computer to listen and learn things that we got online, but we could actually do it in the car as we were walking to and fro around our neighborhood, as we were doing work, in our housework in our house, or even exercising. So why should you podcast? Well, first of all, it's pretty much free. If you've got a computer, it's probably got a microphone. If you've got a smartphone, it has a microphone. There's lots of free apps and free programs you can use to record. Then you just have to find a place to upload it. And we'll be showing you where you can upload your podcasts, host them free on a state-of-the-art podcasting platform, just because you are a power podcaster. And it's easy. All of my marketing buddies tell me, don't say that. Don't tell people it's easy. Fact of the matter is you get on your phone every day and you talk and you talk and you talk. And all we have to do is record something that you're talking about, that you're interested in, that other people are interested in, and then we just upload it. It's super easy. And it's fast because all you do is decide what you want to talk about, make a few notes, a little script if you really need it, and then you talk. 5, 10, 15 minutes, maximum 20 minutes. You can talk for as long as you want because, hey, it's your podcast. But really, 10 or 15 minutes is long enough. And of course, the first 5 of the 10 minutes is going to be taken up with your intro and your extra, which is the introductory time and your before you exit time. So it's really not a lot. And I tell people this to trick you. I'm going to be quite upfront with you. I tell you, particularly like what I do is I do a lot of interviewing. And the people I interview, I just say, oh, it's really easy. We just talk for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. And they all go, oh, okay, I can do that. And an hour goes by and I have like tons of really good stuff. And I make it into 2 or 3 episodes. And they just go, I can't believe how fun that was, how easy that was, how cool it was to spend some time with you. And that's exactly the trick to being a power podcaster, is we do it fast, we're cool about it, it's cool, everybody loves it, the people that are your guests, the people that are listening, and you have a great time. Now, 38% of the population are auditory learners. What does that mean? It means that they learn best listening. They don't learn best looking. Of course, everybody is partially visual, partially auditory, and partially physical, which would mean doing things, or reading as well. But a lot of people, that's the primary way that they prefer to get it. And So that's wonderful because we can just talk. Most of us can talk faster than we can type, and there's a large percentage of the population that wants information that way. And there's 800 million iTunes subscribers. So forget about Android and BlackBerry and Windows phones and everything else. iTunes already has 800 million people who are subscribed, which doesn't mean that all 800 million are going to listen to your podcast, but a certain percentage of them are already set up. So you don't have to teach them about how to use their phone to get into iTunes and how to download things and how to subscribe and all the rest of it. They've been playing around with that forever, okay? And it's at the point now where they're teaching their grandparents how to do this sort of stuff. Christmas time, there's a huge upswing in all this stuff because what do you get grandma and grandpa? Well, you know, they wanted to keep in touch with their grandkids, so they wanted to get a computer, they wanted to get an iPad. Let's show them how to, you know, get some stuff. So they get into iTunes, they fiddle around, and oh, here, look, grandpa, here, grandma, here's a cooking podcast. What's a podcast? And then they teach them all that stuff. You don't have to. And if you have a cooking podcast, you're going to have a bunch of grandparents tuning in, and then they're going to be making those beautiful recipes that you tell people about and serving them. So that's amazing. You've already got a built-in audience of millions and millions of people. Apple just recently announced that they have had over 1 billion podcast downloads. Now, that's very small compared to the number of app downloads, the number of music downloads, the number of movie downloads. But the fact of the matter is that's a lot of podcast downloads. And they're free, and it's not like it's front page. iTunes is pushing movies, they're pushing music, they're pushing apps. Not necessarily pushing podcasts, although it has its own podcast app now, which is really, really cool. But that's a lot of downloads going on, which means that this is maybe not as mature as the app market, but it's certainly not early adopter phase. You want to be in the high growth phase, that's what we're approaching. And 20% of smartphone owners listen to podcasts. Pretty soon, everyone's going to have a smartphone, so that's going to be 20% of 8 billion people. Pretty cool. And of course, as I talk about a little bit more in one of the other lectures, podcasts are going to be available in new cars. You're not even going to have an iPhone to download them or anything. You're just going to be able to push a little button on your car and pick your podcast, subscribe to it, and listen to it every time you get in. Okay, so why should you podcast? You're in control of what you podcast, when you podcast, and for how long. You're the executive producer of your podcast, which means you don't really have to ask, well, how long should it be? What should I talk about? You know, it's what you want. You're the boss. It's also the easiest way for you to really connect to people. As I said before, you've got those earbuds going right into people's brains, basically. You're talking in their ear, and that's pretty intimate thing, and you can make some very, very deep connections with people. It's a powerful way to share your voice, your creativity, your thoughts, your music, or whatever else that you can create. And it also creates a community. So you're able to grow your community. If you already have a tribe, you have a bunch of people that are listening to you or following you on YouTube or Facebook or on your website, this is another way for you to take your message out into your community. And it's easy for people to share. Sometimes I think we forget that, you do an MP3 file, it's not that big, and wow, this was really cool information, George, you should, listen to it here, I'll give you a copy. There's none of this, file sharing problems that you have with movies or music or anything else, because you want your podcast to be out in the community and spread, and it really does spread easily. You get international exposure. A little later in this lecture, I'm going to show you a map of the world and where most of my listeners are and where I see huge opportunities for people to take advantage of what's going on. And if you're an authority in your area or you want to be a leader in your topic area, the podcasting is going to help you achieve that goal. And here's just a few of the podcasts that I'm an executive producer of, or they're mine. And as you can see, there's quite a few. So It's easy. And one of the things that most people don't talk about is because we've talked a little bit about connecting with your audience, but what about connecting with your guests? Like one of the things, or having a co-host. Doing a two-person show is actually a lot easier than doing a one-person show. The other person can help you make sure the energy keeps up, or if you notice they're lagging a little bit in their energy, you can pump them up. So there's that back and forth that occurs from a conversation that's really, really cool. And then when you have guests on, of course, the same thing happens. Well, if you know somebody in your industry that you really want to connect with, one of the best ways of doing it is to invite them to be on your podcast. The second best way of doing it is to invite them to be the co-host of your podcast. And I've done that many, many times with many, many people where I've said, hey, I'm really interested in your topic. I would really like to do some work with you. I think you should have a podcast. And it's really easy. All I'll do is we'll set a time. We'll do it the same, 20 minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes a week. Because we'll do a weekly show, and I'll call you up, 1 o'clock on Monday every week. And if we can't make it, we'll just reschedule it. But we'll just assume that's the time because you need to have a schedule. You can talk for, 15 minutes. You pick the topic and we'll discuss it. I'll look after all the editing, the uploading, and everything else. And they've always said, no problem, Scott. Happy to do that. And I've created really, really powerful business relationships and made some amazing friends doing that. So, it's not all about the money. Now, 40% of podcast listeners are fairly wealthy. They've got a household income of over $75,000 annually. We actually did a bit of a poll on my Weight Loss in the Mind podcast, and we're surprised how many women that listen to us regularly were over 125,000 in income. We were also quite surprised that they told us, but what this means is you're talking to people that have some money to spend, which means they can be high-end clients for you. And I think that's really, really important too, is, to be able to look and say, okay, this is going out, into a general audience. I'm very specific in my audience. What are the chances that they're going to be poor? What are the chances they're going to have discretionary income to spend? And of course, we can see right now, very good chance that they're going to have some money to spend with you if that's what you want. Okay, we talked a little bit before about having a worldwide audience. I'm going to show you a map that shows some of the listening patterns around the world of my audience. And as you can see, predominantly in the United States and Europe, a little bit of activity in the populated areas of Australia, and then some splotches in the rest of the world. And there's a few places in the world that are pretty conspicuous by how little activity they have going on. And this means a couple things, right? So, we have these three places where, generally speaking, fairly wealthy and lots of listening. And then we have these four other areas that I'm picking on, which are fairly well populated, and in fact have way more people, and not really any listeners. So there's a couple things. One is, as some of those places develop, like India and China and Brazil and South America and Africa, they are going to have more listeners, which means that's an opportunity for you to reach more people. But if you happen to be in those places and you're ever wondering, like, how do I get my message to North America or Europe or Australia, places that have money to spend on the services that I want to provide or the product I want to provide, all you have to do is start podcasting, and the chances are somebody in those areas are going to be listening. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of miss is, if you want to get your message out, particularly for, like, I do a lot of work with nonprofits and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and they work a lot in those places that are circled. And, if they're doing work there and they just took 10 minutes to podcast every week what was going on, it looks to me like there would be a lot of people in North America, Europe, and Australia that might be listening. So it's just something to think about. So lots of reasons why you should be podcasting. I hope this has helped get you a little bit excited about the opportunity. It's never gone away, but we've had a few very famous media people start podcasting, and as a result, it's getting a lot of notice right now, which some people think, oh, it's back, we'll never actually went anywhere. But we've got some high-profile people doing it, which means we should be getting more high-profile people doing it, which means more people are thinking about, oh, I should be looking at podcasting. And I think you should be taking some action in that area too. Oops. So the part I forgot was, there you go. Like, people in those areas, when they podcast, they're going to be communicating with people in North America and Europe. It's pretty cool. And that's it for this lecture. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're getting more and more excited about the opportunities that lie ahead for power podcasters. And I really want to emphasize that what we're talking about doing is not something that's difficult. It's easy. It can be a very simple weekly habit that overall is not going to take you much more than half an hour a week. And it's going to give you huge returns. So we'll see you in the next lecture. Thanks for joining me.